Hello everybody, my name is Vince Ciardo and I'm here to bring you this video in an attempt to demystify the technique on how to release a bowling ball for both repeatability / reliability, power, and accuracy. If you're like me, you may find this topic a bit nebulous, a bit frustrating, almost as if it's a black art or witchcraft, and I intend to debunk all that by providing for you a reasonably simple technique on how to do this, and in doing so, I want to lay the foundation for that technique. So, with regarding how to do it, I've heard so many bad things, bad advice, bad tips, and it's been extremely frustrating for me throughout my bowling career. So, as an example, you'll see some information on the internet that actually relates these three objects together: the football, the yo-yo, and the bowling ball, as if there's some kind of direct analogy between the handling or release of all three of these. I'm sorry, I don't see it. I consider this almost an irrelevant discussion. Therefore, I'm going to maybe not so gracefully discard those two objects because I believe they're totally irrelevant. The worst thing I think I've ever heard about releasing a bowling ball was at the point of release, let the ball turn your hand, not your hand turn the ball. Okay, that was just the straw that broke my back. Let alone things like lift up on the ball, don't lift up on the ball. Release it with a relaxed hand, release it with a relaxed hand and maybe breaking your wrist forward. Wow, well, you see a lot of people with cupped wrists. You have to cup your wrist for maximum power. You have to, unload, with your elbow and your wrist to be able to get maximum rotation. Wow, it's just a lot of information here. When you take it all together, it's very confusing. Every little individual thing seems to make sense in and of itself, but it's hard to rationalize. Okay, so let's try to get beyond that. We're going to talk about now the why, the what, and how to implement a great release. Why do we want to do it? Well, the overall goal in bowling is to have fun and to score well, and they're probably both kind of correlated together. In order to score well, you have to have a lot of strikes, and those strikes have to be strung together. In order to string strikes together, you have to be able to maximize your pin carry. In order to maximize your pin carry, you have to have sufficient energy delivered from the ball into the pins to do so. Why? Okay, well, it takes energy to knock pins over, especially for a right-hander when you're entering the pocket, which is between the 1 and the 3, on board 16. The pocket is basically board 18 to board 14. You can carry a strike easily if you enter the pocket on board 17 or board 18. It's not so easy, but if you have sufficient energy in your ball, you can carry a strike, a light strike, or a swishing strike from entering board 15 and sometimes 14. Okay, that leaves us with board 16. Board 16 is the weirdest phenomenon in bowling, created by a simple physics relationship between the angle of collision. On board 16, the angle of collision between a spherical ball and a cylindrical pin is 45 degrees, which is where the deflection force against the ball will be at a maximum. This is the hardest place on the lane from which to carry a strike, and it exists right in the center of the pocket range. Okay, so this has confounded people, since this game began. And I still look at pros and people who are highly skilled in this game. They enter on board 16, they leave a ringing 10 pin or solid 10, they leave a weak 10 or, God forbid, an 8-10, and they look absolutely confused and bewildered. Okay, let's just debunk this. Hitting the pocket on board 16 requires the maximum amount of, let's say, energy to be transferred from the ball into the pins. It's not necessarily about pocket entry angle. That is a fallacy. So let's debunk pocket entry angle right now. If you create a 5-degree pocket entry angle, which they say is optimal, that's a pretty steep angle. It's not necessarily easy to create, but let's say you create it. A lot of pros can readily do this. If the ball enters the pocket from a 5-degree angle, it's going to end up behind the 8-pin for a right-handed bowler or the 9-pin for a left-handed bowler. But speaking from the right-handed perspective solely, it's going to wind up behind the 8-pin, If it deflects, it's going to wind up behind the 5 pin, and if it deflects a lot, it's going to wind up behind the 9 pin. Now, people think that carrying strikes is all about pocket entry angle. And like I say, this is really a myth. And I believe it's twofold. People believe this because, one, there's an optical illusion. If your ball winds up directly behind the 5 pin or the head pin, where it appeared to enter the actual rack, well, it appears not to deflect. But when it should have actually carried all the way through and finished behind the 8 pin, now you know there's a lot of deflection. So this is an optical illusion, so I think that's very misleading. The second thing is, I think, a fundamental misunderstanding between correlation and causation. When you see pros throwing big hooks, developing this steep pocket entry angle, and they're carrying strikes, you just naturally think that that's what it takes to carry a strike. But that's not true. There's a correlation between pocket entry angle and striking only because what it takes to generate that 5-degree pocket entry angle is a very powerful ball. A ball that can release a lot of energy, because it has to release a lot of energy to change direction to create that pocket entry angle. And this is actually part of a problem, not a solution. And I'm going to talk about that next. In order to carry a strike, you have to maintain a drive line of very little angle of deflection. The drive line is defined by the path of the ball from the time it hits the head pin to the time it falls into the pit. Theoretically, if you could enter the pocket on a 0 entry angle and have 0 deflection angle, you win. You're going to carry strikes the maximum amount of time, so the optimal amount. Okay, that's theoretically impossible because based on a sphere hitting a cylinder, there will be an angle in that collision that causes deflection of the ball because it's almost an instantaneous reaction of the ball to hitting the pin. So, what does it take to minimize that deflection? Well, traction minimizes that deflection. So the ball has to have sufficient traction to maintain a reasonable angle of deflection within tolerance to basically maintain the drive line, even if it hits from the position of board 16, the dead zone, to be able to carry the strike. Because you can't carry strikes from board 16. It's obviously been done. They look a little different and they look a little telltale by kind of a sweeping motion of the entire rack of pins, the set of pins, toward the direction that the ball actually entered. It's going to be more straight if the ball entered at a 0-degree angle. It's going to be a sweeping action into the corner of the pit when the ball enters from a 5-degree entry angle. Okay, that said, what does it take to develop traction? And what is traction? We're going to define traction qualitatively by the phase at which the ball is releasing most of its energy and has the best ability to transfer that energy into the pins, as well as simultaneously creating side force that counteracts the deflection force when the ball makes initial contact. Okay? When does that actually occur? Well, you've heard the term, like when you throw the ball, it goes through 3 phases: skid, hook, roll. The hook phase is where the maximum traction is, not the roll phase, not the skid phase. You want to have the ball impact the pins when it's actually hooking, creating a lot of traction, releasing a lot of energy with side force to maintain the drive line. That's the overall goal of why we want to have a powerful and accurate release, because obviously you have to hit the pocket, and that's putting the ball within this type of range from 60 feet away. Okay, so we need power, accuracy, and repeatability, because you have to do this consistently to string strikes. Okay, that's the why we want to develop a great release. Now, that said, that's for scoring and fun, but at the same time, we don't want our thumb to hang up in the ball, creating an absolutely devastating consequence if, when we're swinging it with all the centripetal force and it doesn't come off of our hand, the results are absolutely atrocious. We want to try to avoid that at all costs. The technique I will show you will never have your thumb hang up in the ball again. Okay, what do we have to do in order to get that traction and have that traction phase of the ball happen right before the collision with the pins? We have to be able to have a release that allows us to release the ball at the desired rotational axis angle that we want. Okay, that said, let's talk about energy for a moment. When we're talking about maximizing traction, the two forms of energy that go into the ball are translational energy that you get from your arm swing and your the momentum of your body, okay, created with your legs. This gives the ball energy in a translational direction. When you release the ball, you can impart rotational energy, okay, onto the ball as well. Now, as the ball goes through its skid hook roll phases, in the hook phase it's developing maximum traction. That traction is created by rotational force, not necessarily translational force. This is why, let's say, hooking the ball or putting a lot of rotational energy into it is very important, because that's what will actually convert into traction, not necessarily translational energy. Okay, that said, what do we have to do? We have to be able to release the ball reliably with a lot of angular velocity to create angular and rotational energy that will convert into traction, which converts into maintaining the drive line, imparting energy into the pins, and knocking the entire deck over. Okay, so how do we do this? Well, I contend you're not going to do it with a relaxed hand, because that's going to wind up with a dead flat roll. That's not going to deliver much energy into the pins, because it's not going to have traction. Just like a spinning top doesn't give you much traction, neither does a dead flat roll. By the way, if you want to count revolutions, there's 26.6 revolutions of a bowling ball if you would just roll it down the lane like that from foul line to head pin. Okay, so when you're thinking about, well, how many revs did I get? Think about a dead flat roll. So, generally speaking, right, in order to develop this, we have to have our thumb come under the ball first, have our fingers impart rotational energy into the ball through uplifting force. So yes, you do have to lift up on a ball, but only after your thumb is out of it. In other words, the ball is actually pulling you until your thumb is out, and then you're literally pulling up on the ball, because you're using gravity in your downswing to be able to maintain hand position, and then at the moment of release, you have to get your thumb out and really lift with your fingers to impart the most rotational energy you can. That's not necessarily easy to do. As a matter of fact, okay, it's downright hard to do. You have a split second to pull that maneuver off, and the vast majority of people can't do it when they're trying to execute the wrong techniques. Okay, so now that we know the what, let's get into the how. The technique to do this is really pretty straightforward. But before I actually show you the technique, I have to talk a little bit about grip. Grip is the most important thing in the game. You have to have a great grip with a ball that fits your hand, because there's no way to compensate for a bad grip. You can't expect to go to a house, a bowling alley, pick up a house ball, and throw it when it doesn't fit your hand and expect the results that you'd see on TV, whether you're looking at a pro or an amateur. So generally speaking, what constitutes a great grip? 16-pound ball, right? If I put my hand in it, I create tension in that grip. The ball's not coming off my hand, and I have zero grip pressure. So if I can maintain the ball on my hand with zero grip pressure by just the tension in the grip, I think it's a pretty decent grip. So I kind of define a great grip by the lack of having to put grip pressure with my hand, okay, on the ball. One thing about the physical grip itself, a lot of people will tell you that they want you to grip the ball with a straight thumb versus a thumb that curls at the first knuckle. Okay. Now, I'm not necessarily going to disagree with that. However, I do have a couple issues. Number one, keeping the thumb straight does not work for me for two reasons. It tends to put all the pressure right at the base of the thumb in the grip, which is right where my thumb has a tendency to split open, and that causes me every dilemma known to man in the game of bowling. Okay. The other thing it does is that when you press your thumb forward and it's straight, it tends to dynamically change the distance of the span, which is constituted by the distance between the first knuckle on the inner two fingers to the base of the thumb. If that dynamically changes, it creates another degree of variation, which is significant, and it's hard to create a feel which results in a repeatable release technique. Okay, that said, I curl my thumb. Now in the end, I'm not saying it's better, but it works for me because it does not dynamically change the span, and it also helps take the pressure off that one point in my thumb. And the release technique that I'm going to show you allows you to grip the ball either way, and the result is the same. Okay, now for the actual release technique. It's actually pretty simple. As you know, 16-pound ball, I've got no grip tension. As a matter of fact, the ball's not coming off my hand. Even if I throw it, or swing it, I should say, I can shake it, it's still not coming off my hand. You're probably wondering, well, how do I get it off my hand? Okay, well, that's how I get it off my hand. Can you do that? Did you see it? Of course not. I'm just joking. The reason why is because the release technique of the bowling ball is when your hand is still in it, not as your hand is coming out, which is what you see in the video. So you can watch all the videos you want on the internet, and you will not be able to emulate what you see there unless you know what is happening when the hand is inside the ball, which you can't see. So here's what's happening when my hand is in the ball. I have a grip, and I suddenly shift the position of my hand when I want to release to this, like Spider-Man, where he shoots the web out of his wrist. Grip, release. Grip, release. The translation from one potential position to the other is what creates the release. Okay, so to be able to maximize our traction and control where the traction phase is on the lane, we have to be able to release the ball at any time, okay, from any hand position. And as I'll demonstrate, you can do that with this technique. Okay, so here we're going to start off with a very bad hand position on the outside of the ball, okay? This would normally lock up somebody's thumb in a ball, in a fingertip grip, all right? I can still release it with that technique. The worst of the worst is trying to do it while the hand is on the outside, but it's coming around in a spinning motion. This is actually what you never want to do, but a lot of amateur players, when they're trying to learn, start off with. They can't get their thumb out of the ball. With this technique, you can actually do it. You can escape no matter what. Okay, now for the proper hand position behind the ball, you can easily release it. From a cupped position with the ball over the index finger, like this, you can easily release it. And the best thing about this technique is it's super easy to practice because I'm just demonstrating how to do it. Start off with your hand straight down, release. Feel comfortable with that? Take the next step and start throwing the ball to yourself with different launch angles. One that's kind of straight, one that could be on a lofted angle. You can even throw the ball straight up in the air if you want to. Oops, there you go, like that. Higher up. There you go. Practice at home. That's all you need to do. That simple. Okay? There's the release technique. I hope you found this interesting. I hope you found it useful. And my hope for you is to have more fun with the game and score better. Okay? Thank you for your time, and I look forward to your comments. Take care. God bless.